Hello everyone. Good morning, or I guess maybe afternoon in some places. Um, so one of the things that I wanted to talk about, or with you guys, is talk about housing assessments and how to become a building inspector. My name is Jonathan Gregg. I've been talking about housing assessments and how to become an inspector for years now, because I think it's a great career and it's a good thing to get into. I've been probably doing housing inspections even when I was in college and when I was a summer student. I started doing housing inspections back in I think 2000. I started doing some housing assessments for some First Nations. And just a little bit about myself. I graduated from a civil program through the college, and then later, as I started to work and learn about doing housing assessments and housing inspections, mostly in First Nations, I learned that there are ways to become a building inspector, and that there are training and different programs out there that you can take to become a building inspector. And it is a process, and it does take a while to become a building inspector. So throughout our presentation, we're going to talk about housing assessments, because that's a big part of our job at First Nation tribal councils when we're doing community work and housing, because there's a lot of renovations, a lot of programs out there for housing, and that's one of the things that we do a lot is housing assessments and how to become a good rounded and building inspector, because there's always not enough training, or there's not enough training that's geared towards how to become or how to conduct a home assessment. And that's some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to flip back and forth from the slide, and then you can look at my face. And then what we'll do is, if anyone missed or logged on late, we're going to have questions at the end, and then we'll go from there. All right. So I'm just going to flip over to the presentation now. So I work at Independent First Nations Alliance and the Technical Services Department, and I am the technical manager right now. And so that's where I work. And we're going to talk about today's housing assessments, but also with a focus on becoming a building inspector. But I just wanted to talk about housing assessments first, and then we'll talk about getting into becoming a building inspector. So in our jobs in First Nations and tribal councils, when housing assessments, what are they? They're a conditional inspection, a visual inspection when you go to the unit. And one of the things I try to tell homeowners and housing managers is that this is what we saw today. This is how the unit is today. And this is the conditions that are there. So, and it's important because when you're doing housing assessments and when you're doing building inspections, you want to make sure that you note health and safety items. You want to note smoke alarms. You want to note handrails, because they may or may not be working that point in time when you're there, because you don't know, the battery could go dead the next day. So those are many things that you try to cover when you're doing a house assessment, is health and safety. Then also during an assessment, we like to give an estimate for the renovation cost, for the repairs. And then we also want to just talk about, during the season when we're doing the inspections, is it springtime, summertime? Because those conditions will affect the house when you're doing an inspection and may give you limited access, especially if you're doing a house assessment during the winter and you got to comment on the shingles or access into the crawl space, or maybe it's a springtime and everything's wet. So those are the factors that you need to be considering when you're doing your house assessment. And it's a great tool when you have a finished, completed housing assessment for your community. And a lot of my talks will probably be related to First Nations and related to giving these reports to the housing department or chief and council, because when it comes time to housing dollars, we know that there's a limited amount of housing dollars. So that's what we want to make sure that we capture in our housing assessments, the cost, and make sure that we capture all the things that need to be repaired and do a thorough inspection. All right. For the equipment, and now this day and age now, like it's crazy with this whole COVID thing, you know, wearing a mask, wearing gloves and stuff. And there's new procedures, and each of these procedures in your community, when you go do a house assessment, it's dependent upon the housing department and the occupant. Now, do you have to wear a mask? Do the people leave the house when you do the house assessment? Or is there allowed to be one person there? And always follow the rules and regulations that are in that community and respect the wishes of the homeowner. Like some of the stuff that people have been doing is turning on all the lights, opening all the doors, so that you as an inspector, when you go through now during COVID, that you don't have to touch anything, so that there's no cross, you know, the whole touching of doorknobs and that kind of stuff. So I've been telling our staff here at IFNA, wear your gloves, wear your masks, make sure that you have the proper PPE equipment required by IFNA and also for the First Nation and the community. So, and then of course, the list of equipment there, you know, you need a flashlight, tools, tape measure, ladder, you need a good working camera, you need a notebook. If you get more advanced, some people are starting to use tablets, phones, and you need some hand tools, because sometimes you do have to get access into the attic. It may be screwed shut, or the crawl space. And then always just make sure that you respect the homeowner, and that you, especially the condition of the home. Maybe you're inspecting a home that has been vacant for a while. Maybe the house has been condemned for many reasons. So that's where you can wear a tie-back suit or wear some kind of full body protection, because you never want to expose yourself. And then also with other things in the home, you just want to make sure that you're not digging around or poking around where you may injure yourself, right? With people with health conditions or whatever, you have to respect that and just make sure you're protecting yourself when you're doing your house inspections. So going back to talking about equipment, here's a list of equipment. This is not a be-end and end-all list of equipment that you need, especially with this day and age, talking about COVID and stuff like that. Just make sure that you're following and reach out to your health department, especially to see if there's any additional safety equipment that you need while doing house assessments also. And another thing I forgot is that generally I get our inspectors to bring enough PPE equipment, especially a mask and gloves, for even the homeowners if they want to be present during the housing assessment. All right. So this is where I wanted to probably talk a little bit more and longer about how to become a building inspector. And each province and the National Building Code, there are a couple of different avenues, but a lot of us know that we use, in First Nations, we use the National Building Code. And that's a model-based code, and that different provinces across Canada, they either adopt that code, or other provinces like ours here in Ontario, they develop their own code based off the National Building Code. But now in Ontario, a lot of us know who are into building inspections or who are certified, that the National Building Code and the Ontario Building Code now, there's very little difference now in regards to becoming one code. There's variances and based on insulation and different things like foundations and how to come up with your R value of your house. But for the most part, what I try to tell communities or tell people to get training is adopt one. Use the National Building Code or the Ontario Building Code, but a lot of times also it's more or less just enforcing the code and learning that code for communities. That's what I tell communities. But as for people in Ontario, if you want to start to become certified, the Ontario Building Code is probably the way to be certified, because there's an association here in Ontario, and that's where I belong to. So the National Building Code, First Nations, that's the one that they have, unless the First Nation adopts it through a BCR, Band Council Resolution. Then the First Nation can choose to have the National Building Code or the Ontario Building Code listed as their building code. And then I think also to further that, you should ask them to give you as an inspector or the tribal council to be able to enforce that code, whichever one they're using, the Ontario Building Code or the National Building Code. It's one of those two that they can adopt. And then that gives you authority, because a lot of you know, maybe people in municipalities, you have this system in place where you have authority to issue stop work orders, issue code compliance issues. But in First Nations, technically, unless it's been adopted by Bound Council resolution, we can only recommend and advise that this building should be modified, should be renovated, or it doesn't meet code. Going back to housing assessments, if we find a house that has no smoke alarms or no working smoke alarms, to make sure that it's enforced, as a building inspector, we don't have that authority. So that's something to talk about with your tribal council, your managers, and your First Nations, of saying that this is the next step that we want to take to get to have jurisdiction in there, because the building codes are about health and safety, and us as building inspectors, as you become certified, that's what you learn, is that you're enforcing the code, and the code is about health and safety. We don't want fires. We know there's a lot of fires in First Nations. We know that there's sometimes not proper fire equipment or fire departments that can address the need for health and safety stuff. So as you can see here, I'm just going to ask, is my presentation showing here? Because I can't see myself. I just want to make sure the presentation is being seen. This is my administrator. Can you respond? Yeah, okay, all right. So there listed as the Ontario Builders Association, or the OBOA. So this is what I want to talk about in Ontario. Ontario has adopted its own building code. You know, it's a big, thick book. And there is a certification program that the province has. So the tests are administered through the Municipal Housing Affairs, the ministry in Ontario. And then there is a separate association, Ontario's Builders Association, the OBOA. They give you the certification. So you write the exams, and if you pass the exams through the ministry, through the provincial system, then you can start to become a building inspector. You don't need to have a college or years of experience. If you want to become a member of the OBOA, which I'm a part of, I think I've been a member since 2006 or 7, so dating myself now. So I've been doing it for a while, but I would encourage you guys out there, anyone who wants to become a certified inspector, you go through the OBOA process, and because the ministry contracts it out to Humber College, that's why I have Humber College listed there. They're the main providers now, and most of it's virtual right now. We had a few staff members here at IFNA take some of that training. I think it goes, a 1-week course goes over 2 weeks, and it's half a day. So, and it's about, they average from $500 to $700 a course. But to become OBOA certified, which gives you the BCQ designation, and for First Nations, because we can't get the OBOA ministry designation as a CBOC, you get building code qualified. So, and it's a series of about 8 building code exams, courses, about 1 week, and you got to take between 8 and 10 to become building code certified. And they're 1 week, And usually I tell people start out with part 9 because most of us do residential inspections, right? So you start out with part 9 training courses, whether through the Humber College, or you can find out courses that they have listed on the OBOA website. And they also have an application process. If you did come through college, if you took civil engineering, architectural, or a university program, then you can directly apply and they will evaluate you. And then you can also, if you haven't went to college, but you've been a carpenter or been in the construction trade, 3 to 5 years of experience, you can make an application and apply. So there's 2 streams. You can come from a carpentry background, or you can come from an education background, and then you can apply, and then you can start your path on becoming a building inspector. And the courses, they need a 70% pass. And I don't even know now if they give you your actual mark now. When I took it, back in the day, it was a piece of paper. You sat down in a classroom and you wrote on paper. But I think now all the tests are online. And thank God I don't have to do that, because I think they're harder now doing it online and all that kind of stuff. So, but I encourage you guys out there, you're young people, if you're thinking about becoming a building inspector, it is a good job. And it is very gratifying. So, and then some of the other things, there's other training out there. Once you start this program, there's CMHC training, although it has been less, but there is CMHC training if you go on their website. And same thing with CMHC across the provinces. It's a little bit different for each province, but generally you can access some training through CMHC. And usually we have First Nation consultants from CMHC that we can request training for. And we can even, as tribal councils, we have delivered some training in our communities, and then you can gear that towards inspections a little bit. You can gear that towards construction. So it's working with your First Nation consultant from CMHC to make some of that training happen. And for those of us in tribal councils and in First Nations, you can make a proposal-based submission to ISC, to Indigenous Services Canada. You can apply for funding there to get training in your communities or in your tribal council. And it's always kind of one-off sometimes, but we all got to start somewhere for training. And the other thing that you can get trained in is WET. It's wood energy technology transfer. And basically that, for a simple term, is just wood stoves. A lot of First Nation homes and some communities are in the 90% of the homes are heated by wood. And there's a separate training program, a separate association that gives certification based on the CSA standard for wood stove installation. And there's about 4 courses to become fully certified to like level 3, I believe. But level 1, visual inspection, it's about a 1-week course, and it's 6 days, and there's actually 3 different courses in there, 3 tests, and same thing there. You have to take those courses, and then you have to pass with a 70 or 75%. And then you also, depending if you're just new to inspections, you need about 80 weeks or 80 home inspections of wood stoves, and your supervisor or your mentor to sign off on it. So that's another important certification that I encourage people who are working in First Nations, especially if your communities have a lot of wood stoves. I would encourage you guys to look into that. And their website, everything now, we all know, most of us know how to, go online. If you type in the wood energy transfer website, you can apply. They have courses now, and I think same thing, their courses are online. But that's an important one, because wood stoves are used heavily, with the flue pipe and the clearances to combustibles. Those are very important. There's been so many fires now started from wood chimneys not being properly installed. So it's important. That's another one. That's another certification that you can get. And that certification is good for 3 years. And then you can also, you get maintenance points by taking different training that allow you to keep your designation. But I think after so many years, you have to take a 1 or 2 day course with wood energy technology. And then there's HVAC training. There is also another association there. And then eventually, once we grow our First Nation housing community, we're going to start to have stuff like this available for future training. That kind of stuff is going to be available on our website. We're going to have more linkages there. And then the other thing that's kind of out there is estimating training. There's a quantity survey that you can take because as doing a house assessment, like I was saying in some of the descriptions, you have to be an estimator. You have to have technical construction understanding. You have to have good written report writing skills, and you have to have good client relations. Now, going through college, you get some of those things. When you go through college, you learn how to do basic estimating. You learn how to write reports. You take some English, right? Which is not my strong suit. I'm more of a math guy myself. So in client relations, I just want to talk about that. When you're in somebody's home, and I know a lot of us who've been doing house inspections, we understand that it's private, it's their home. So having respect for the homeowner. And we see some sad conditions a lot in some of the housing that we go into. And just to be respectful and to not make them feel anything about who you are or what you're there. I always tell people when I go into their house, I'm here to look at the house. I'm here to make sure that the house is safe for you, that the smoke alarms work, that there's no mold. And if there is, we're going to identify it. And from there, we're going to make sure that I capture all this stuff. And that's the part of the client relations, and just being respectful. And when we talked about having our tools to do an inspection, having a camera and taking pictures, because the pictures, the old saying, they're 1,000 words, right? But explaining to the homeowner that these pictures are for chief and council only, and you're not going to share anything that is going to break their privacy or anything like that. You're taking pictures of poor conditions. You're taking pictures of the wood stove. You're taking pictures of the outside. So you're not taking pictures of making sure, like, especially you don't want to take pictures of them and having that in a report. That's just some basic stuff to understand. But for you young individuals, as you get into inspections and you start to want to do inspections and start doing them, those are some of the things that you just need to make sure that you're not breaking their privacy, and making sure that what they have in their home is theirs. And also with client relations, working with the leadership, working with First Nations, chief and council, just making sure that they get the facts, because they want to know how much the house costs, the condition of the home, because they have to make the call on what's going to be renovated, what's not going to be renovated. There's never enough money. So learning to work with First Nation leadership, and then also learning to work with the housing management and also the construction guys, because in tribal councils, most of us technicians, we work with all levels with the community, right from the workers, the housing management, and then chief and council, because housing is very important in the communities, and especially when there's not enough funding and there is a high demand for renovations and for new housing. So again, just to recap a little bit, one of the things that I would encourage young people to become a building inspector is to start looking at the Ontario Building Association, the OBOA, and start looking at the National Building Code. You can go to NRCan website. It's all on there. I'm not going to go into too much detail because the internet is so easy to use. It's so easy to use. You just type in becoming a building inspector. All the links come up. You go to the Ontario Building Code website. You can order the code. Wherever you're working, I would encourage, if you don't have a building code in your office at the First Nation level, I would encourage you guys to order a building code and start using it, right? Because it is health and safety. How many deaths have there been in communities because of poor construction or lack of understanding? Okay. I'm going to move on to the next slide here. Again, if there's any questions, questions are at the end. Okay, so this is just, if you can see here, this is a First Nation. I just wanted to show a picture of the importance of being a building inspector. Because a lot of times, stuff like this, talking about the picture, the homeowners a lot of times don't complain, or they don't say anything, or they get tired of complaining, that their voice is not heard, that their concerns are not heard. So in First Nations, being a building inspector, getting out in the communities and doing those inspections is to capture stuff like this, to bring it to the attention of the leadership, bring it to the attention of people who have the authority to do renovations, right? So that's why I think being a building inspector is such a crucial job in First Nation housing. And I encourage all you guys to go out there and take more training. Get out in the community and do existing home inspections, because there are conditions out there that are health and safety concern to many occupants. And then, of course, just the housing assessment, the data collection that you want to do. You want to know the size of the house. You want to measure the house. You want to know the year of construction. You want to know when the house was built. You want to know when the last renovation is. So you want the history of the whole house. You want to understand, so that when you're doing your assessment, these are the things you want to know. You want to know the people that are living there. You want to know the services. And this is all stuff that goes into your notes or right into your tablet, however you're doing that assessment, whichever level you're at. I still like the old notebook, writing notes. I draw a little site plan on my notepad of the house, just a crude sketch. How many bedrooms, living room. I write all that down. And then you want to go through the house in the same order. And you want to make sure whether you start at the crawl space, basement, then you go to the bedrooms, bathroom, living room, then you go through the outside. But you want to have checklists. When I first started doing inspections, we had a checklist. And we would go through that checklist and we would make sure that, you captured everything. The lighting, the electrical, the plumbing. You want to make sure that you take a look at everything. And high on the top of the checklist would be health and safety items, smoke alarms, wood stoves, the furnace. You just want to make sure that you're looking at these things and that you can red flag anything that is a health and safety concern. Because you as an inspector, you've been in that house now, and there's some due diligence for you if you do find a situation that requires for correction to happen. If you find a smoke alarm that's not working, you have to notify that to the housing manager, or in case of chief and council saying that smoke alarm in that house does not work. We all know if you don't, what could happen, right? And then you also want to, after you're all done, you collected your data, the one part that I always tell people is after you go through the house, you looked at everything, sit down if the occupant is there, or now in COVID, you go outside, or unless the room is big enough with social distancing, that you do interview with the homeowner and you talk about what you have found, and you talk about if there's anything that they have missed or if there's something that they want to point out to you. Because when you do your house assessment, there's always that indication that they need to tell you what they know, and they do. But go through your house assessment process first. Do your inspection. and then talk to the homeowner, and then they can take you to the area of their concern if they have any. Because most of the time I find that you will find the areas of concern of doing a proper house assessment, and then you can talk about that with the homeowner. And then, of course, then you generate your report, and you send it off to the housing department or chief and council. And then also from there, in tribal councils, you take it to the next level, and it may become a CMHC program or an ISC program or a First Nation Market Fund for renovations for that house. Now, that's one thing I'll say personally about when you do a house inspection and you find something wrong and the homeowners are living in poor conditions, and then you get funding, and then you can see the house being renovated, and then as the building inspector, you're approving construction, you're working with the carpenters, and then you see that house finished. You see that house finished. You know, it's very, I don't know what this, you just feel joy, you feel happy that you made a difference in somebody's life, right? Because getting a house renovated, full renovations in a house, and you're looking after the community and things are happening, that's what I like. That's what I like about doing house inspections, is making that difference. You know, we all wish there was millions of dollars, which we all need. We all know First Nations need millions and millions of dollars to renovate houses. But, you know, when you do the 4 or 5 a year and you're making those changes in that community, I think that goes a long way of doing our job. Because housing is very important. It is very important. Okay. All right. So this slide, I had it before, but we couldn't get the link working. But at the end, if anybody wants our existing home assessment tool, it's an Excel-based format. You can just email us or email me, and I can send you the report, and then you guys can just modify that housing assessment Excel tool that we use. It's basically a report. I can share that with you guys. And what we have done in that thing is we also worked in the estimating in there, the formula. So if you put in a window, it punches out a number saying that if you need to change 5 windows, it gives you that kind of stuff in there, right in the Excel. So we worked in all the formulas, and then we're happy to share that. But when you use it, make sure that you add your own company or your own First Nations disclosure at the end of the report. We always need that disclosure. You always need to say this was a visual inspection at this date and time. This is not a be and end all, right? It's a tool, and it's a tool that we use to track housing conditions. So if anybody wants this at the end, you can message me, email me, or go on the First Nation community website, and we can share that housing assessment with you and what we use. So once we were talking about, what do you call it? Building assessments. I just want to go back, make sure the previous slide we talked, talking about going back to housing assessment, email me. My email will be up at the end. I can share our tool with you, and then we'll go from there. And then next, I wanted to talk about the housing assessment process a little bit in First Nations. I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to talk a little bit faster. And so there's usually a request for a home assessment to the building inspector, and then that, or it comes from chief and council or the housing manager. And then usually the housing assessment or the request for the inspection is from one of the agencies now. There's FNHC. They have the contract for CMHC now to administer the PCRs, the Section 95 process. If anyone from OFNTSC is on the line, I'm the top 1 building inspector for outstanding reports, but we're getting through them. There's also ISC always requires inspections. If they provide funding for housing, they require building assessment or inspection reports also. And then just a note on CMHC now, on some of their progress reports for housing, they require you they require a certification or some kind of a process, certification that you have been trained in the building code, that you're a certified building inspector. So with me, I always list my OBOA certification number, and that's what I list in the report. And then the other thing about that is that you also, because your name's on the line, and one thing that I forgot to mention earlier is that you want to make sure that your tribal council or the company you work for or the First Nation, if you're going out and doing housing assessments, you want to make sure that you are covered by insurance. Just like your car, just like anything else, your house, fire protection, you as a building inspector should have insurance through your company. And then another thing too that you may want to have is insurance for your personally. Go get your own personal insurance. I have done it in the past. I'm not knowledgeable now. I haven't done it right now. So, but I made sure through our tribal council that we have insurance for doing house inspections for that type of work. And then you can choose or decide how much of a liability. It's like $2 million is the old liability. You want to be in the $5 to $10 million liability because $2 million doesn't go far anymore. And then going back to the housing process assessment, you want to make sure that when you're going out doing assessments, you give notice by letter. If you're going to go out, and which we have done at IFNA, where we do go out and do mass inspections, you want to update community centers. You want to update chief and council. Facebook, everyone uses Facebook in a lot of First Nations. You update your inspection dates and stuff like that. And then you want to narrow it down right down to the homeowner when you're going to show up. Because all of us are busy. We all need that specific time. And don't forget COVID rules now when you go do those assessments. And you always explain why you want to do that, the intent of the assessment. A lot of times, just like anybody would, when your house is assessed in the communities, you're expecting renovations to happen. So a lot of times that's not the case. So what we have been telling people is that we're updating the housing database. We're updating existing information with anticipation for funding to come down the pipe, whether from CMHC, IFC. All right, I'm going to fly through here. So the homeowner, after we've done the assessment, what I was talking earlier about sitting down, talking with the homeowner. This home was one of the ones that I inspected in the First Nation. This is kind of the end product of wrap renovation for CMHC program. But when you do your interview with the homeowner, you want to make sure that they have everything that they captured, that they have told you. Maybe they said that there was a flood 5 years ago. There's no evidence of now. So those kind of things you want to make sure that you get from the homeowner, the history of the home, because they know the sound, the creaks. They know if it leaks in the springtime, during heavy rain. There just may be conditions that are not present when you're doing your visual home inspection. And then on occasion, now this isn't on occasion, is you may have to do a further investigation. You might have to do the certain TV celebrity where you tear the house apart. This is no good, this is not to code, but usually rare times have you do investigation where you have to remove paneling, drywall, or open something up. But generally I do that with the housing department from the community so that they can put it back together or temporarily put it back together prior to renovation starting. Because those are some of the things that you just don't learn. Like you can take all the building code training, but going back to that client relations is understanding that what you're doing, you're not tearing apart stuff. And the homeowner understands that in the housing department, because it might be months or a year before that house gets renovated. So you don't want to be opening something up unless you absolutely think you have to, especially if you're going to look for that mold or there's evidence of water leaking into the building. You just got to be prepared that you coordinate with staff to repair that if you do open up a section of the building. Okay, housing assessments. The report, I just want to quickly highlight, We talked about the health and safety items. Wood stove in a lot of our communities is number one. Smoke alarms is a high one, especially with the new code regulations. For some of you don't know, you got to have one per floor, one per bedroom, and they got to be interconnected so that if one goes off, they all go off, and per floor. And crawl spaces, what I try to do, if there's any kind of heating source or mechanical system or plenums or flues, getting into some technical thing there, but basically if there's any ductwork down there, I try to encourage the contractor or the homeowner or the community, the First Nation, to put a smoke alarm in the crawl space. Any exposed wiring, ramps and handrails, blocked windows, especially in basements, full height basements, when the window has been broken for years and the community boards it up, that's a means of egress that needs to be addressed. These are the things that you point out. Is there a second door? Building code doesn't allow it because most First Nation homes are within a certain size and that they don't need a second egress. But during construction or renovation or major renovation, I try to encourage the placement of a second door just for health and safety, but it is not a code thing. But these are things of best practice when you're doing renovations. You want to make sure that you capture plumbing. You want to make sure that there's no plumbing leaks. You know, a $5,000 repair could have been avoided if someone just had turned that hose or turned that connection on that water line. You want to make sure that you have detailed descriptions on your housing assessment, right? And these are all things going back to understanding of what it takes to be a well-rounded building inspector. Education, training, technical knowledge, because sometimes you don't have the right skills or tradespeople doing the work in the community. So a lot of times as a building inspector, you're also a teacher. You're showing guys, you're doing simple drawings, simple sketches. You're providing manuals. You're providing the background for the guys on the ground to do the repairs. Because in First Nations, you know, the one thing I love about this job doing inspections is that you get exposed to so much and you can do so much. I mean, there's endless work when it comes to renovating a house. So being that strong support for you guys in tribal councils and First Nations, we all know that it's a full-time job. It's a big deal, especially when you start doing inspections. Like some years, I remember I inspected 70, 80 brand new units, you know, 5 inspections per house. You know, that's a lot of paperwork, but that's a lot of making sure that the home is built right for the homeowner. I always tell guys in the community, when they're renovating, building new houses, you're building your house for your community, your brother, your cousin, right? So you want to do it right. And as a building inspector, when you're tribal council, you have those connections, that family type connection. So you want to make sure everyone is doing their due diligence, right? And then also, I always encourage everyone to try to include an estimate, class C to D estimate, you know, within 20%, and provide that number. And that number can be used as a tool for planning purposes. And then when you get further more experience, and what we try to do here at IFNA is we try to classify the house or the system, say 0 is poor, 10 is brand new. So you want to kind of give a classification or a rating for that home, right? But that's getting more into detail in, about once you start collecting your data and your housing assessments. All right, kind of flying along here. Completed assessments. I talked a little about this just now, making sure that you have everything there. You can see that this First Nation here, this home was overcrowded. So there was extra wear and tear. And that's the other thing, side note here on overcrowding. The National Building Code has a certain standard based on occupancy and based on age of children. And a lot of times at First Nations, because there's not enough funding, the home becomes overcrowded. You have 2, 3, 4 families living in one house. So building materials and systems of the home are designed for a certain life period. For instance, a toilet is probably designed to say flush 50,000 times. We all know it's more, but in where you have overcrowding, within a shorter time period, they may reach that 50,000 flushes in 1 to 2 years because there's 10 people living there when the house has been designed for 3 people. So those are the kind of things, as a building inspector, you got to take into account for overcrowding. You got to take into account that this house is deteriorating faster because of overcrowding. And that may, if you do a house assessment and nothing happens, you should go back in that house within a year or 2 years because conditions have changed. You don't want to be using old reports for renovation projects for submitting for funding and stuff like that, or even for the band to use. You always want to make sure you have current information prior to inspection. And if that house is selected for renovation based on your assessment, and if that assessment is a year old, you may want to go back and reassess that house to make sure that there's nothing changed. And there may say, the smoke alarms all don't work, or though there's a new wood stove that was installed. So that's why you always need to make sure that the information is accurate, right? Before you send it away. Okay, next. I think this is it here. All right. I don't know how many people are on. I can't tell. Maybe I can't see, but there's my email. If anyone wants that existing home assessment tool that we use, and yeah, please email me and I can send that over to you. And if there's any questions, I'm not sure if anyone's online or I'm just talking in the blind. You know that movie Gravity? Say, oh, talking in the blind. Oh, there's, okay, here we go. People are typing. Let's see here. Okay, Matt, you might need to help me, the administrator. How can I? Andrew. Let's see, can I put Andrew on? Hey, Andrew. Is your audio on? Can I hear you?
Yeah, I think so. Can you hear me?
Okay, all right. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering who covers the electrical inspections.
Okay, so in Ontario, and I think it's for the most part, whoever the provider is. So we have Hydro One, and in remote communities, there's Hydro One remotes. So the provincial system, who is the supplier of electricity, they're the ones who provide the electrical inspection. Here in Ontario, we call it the ESA, the Electrical Safety Authority, and then you would contact them. So if you're doing a renovation in one of your communities and you need an electrical safety inspection, you call the ESA, you pay the fee, and they come up and do the inspection to make sure all the electrical is good. Now, the other thing that can happen, if your electrical contractor is certified or is a master electrician, the ESA, that authority will allow a percentage of his work to be completed and they only need to check 10%. So that's something, especially for remote communities or where you have limited access to the building inspector, electrical inspector coming around, is to make sure that your contractor is certified with the ESA so that in the event that they can't come out and do inspection, they know that that contractor has a reputation that they do quality work and good work moving forward. So that's kind of generally, but as for inspection, just over the years and experience through different training, you generally start to see things that look out of place, you know, especially for for receptacles to be grounded by the kitchen, you know, by the sink and then the room. Those are some of the things that you, as inspectors, you kind of learn as you start doing inspections, things to look out for. because sometimes we're the first eyes and ears doing a building inspection even before ESA, because I know, especially just for Northern Ontario, getting connected to the grid will probably cause some issues if there's been no inspections on new construction. So just to keep that in mind for you guys up there, especially where you have your own independent power authority, getting the houses turned over, there is a process there that has to happen. Did I answer your question?
Perfect. Thank you very
All right. Okay. Okay, there's another question here. Bear with me. All right, some loon guy asked for the template. He asked me at the housing conference, and I don't know if I sent it to him, so apologize for that. Let's see here. I'm going to see if I can bring someone else up here who has a question. Hold on here. If I don't get to you guys, oh, here we go. Let's try this guy here. Hey!
Hey, good morning. Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yes. How are you doing? Is it snowing over there?
Yes, we got at least 3 to 4 inches of snowfall this morning.
Yes. What's your question?
My question was about you were talking about the Ontario training. Now,
Yeah.
my question was about Quebec training.
So in Quebec, I'm not sure of the process, but I know talking to other people over the years, there is a process in Quebec for you to become a certified inspector. And I can't remember if Quebec has their own building code. Do you guys use the national building code? Or do you have a Quebec?
They have the Quebec building code. I have a copy of that. And I do have the NBC Part 9 with the national building code on PDF.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And with the Quebec training, I don't remember if you recall, I took a course called Construction Business Management.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm able to order my RBQ license to build houses, but with the inspector's training, I took 2. I completed 2. One is CAPI.
Yeah.
CAPI Online, which is part of, I think it was in Ontario.
Okay.
The Tarion, we learned the
Tarion.
And then the other one was, what's it called? It was based from a college in Montreal. So we did our training near Montreal in a home, and we did our exam there, and I passed that. So I have 2 of those diplomas or certificates. And with the previous one I completed was Internachi known. Well, not known. The word I'm looking for. Can't think of it.
So I guess if you're asking, like, for what are you asking, what kind of training or how do you become certified?
Yeah, to be recognized with the CMHC training.
Okay,
I have my 2 certificates in as an inspector.
For CMHC, the way they used to do things here, there was really no, in Ontario, there was really no set standard of what CMHC, they would say, have this and that, right? It was generally, if you had a technical background, whether in construction or whether in education from, say, civil engineering, architectural, and then you started to take courses related to building code, they would say yes or no. There used to be an individual, I can't remember the name now, but they would review your resume, and they would say, yes, you can inspect. Or they would say, no, you should take a little bit more building code training. Now, I don't know how it is in Quebec now, but I know just like with IFC, they're starting to actually say, no, just we're not telling you, but just write down your designation. Are you a certified inspector? So they're starting to put the onus back on you to be certified with somebody, and then they'll accept it or not. So in Quebec, I imagine it's very similar, that it is probably based on whatever certification you do have, and if they recognize that.
Yeah.
So even in Ontario now, for some of the guys that are just starting out here at the office, I know that most of them will need years of construction experience, 3 to 5 years, or they need to have a college diploma, and then they need about 4 building code courses related to Part 9. So in Ontario, we have the house, fire protection, HVAC, and the legal course to be a building inspector. It's usually about 4 or 5 courses. And then I know that CMHC generally will say, yeah, they are qualified to do PCRs, Section 95, or RAP inspections. But I would encourage you to contact your, what are they called now? First Nation consultant. That's what they're called in Ontario. Talk to your CMHC consultant.
Representative.
Right? And it may start out, because I know nationally now, some of our resumes, when you want to be certified, it goes to a national office, and there's an individual that would review your resume. And to be honest, I don't know who that is, but your best bet is to go with your First Nation CMHC consultant.
Yeah, that's a work in progress right now. I brought it up yesterday, and just to take the load off on our housing manager.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, well, I've been working in the construction industry for the past 14 years.
Yeah.
And all the training courses I took are related in the construction industry.
Okay. All right. Well, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah.
I'm gonna click over to Walt. No, not Walt.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for listening.
All right.
Okay, let me see here. I'm gonna try to click on someone else who may have a question. Let's see here. All right, if there's any more questions, can someone just say message in the chat there? Because if somebody wants a question, I'm going to put you on video if you have a question. Because I type about 1 word a minute. Asset planner. Okay, so okay, there's a question from a Walter. Data collection. He says, what housing programs would reserves use that don't get outdated or money grabbers because assessments need to be inputted in a computer? So, and so one thing that we started doing at IFNA is we use the assessment tool of Excel, Microsoft Excel, because Microsoft Excel is always updated annually. Most of us use a subscription now, and everything's updated. And Excel data is clean enough or clean that you can put that into other programs. Now, the problem with creating your own inspection tool and your own software, that it always has to be updated from other operational programs. So a lot of times those people out there that have those housing assessment programs, those tools, those companies that are out there, they're always updating and building it in the background, and that's what you pay for. But I always encourage communities, as you start out, just use Excel as your database, because that Excel thing, as far as we know, as long as Microsoft is still in existence, will always be operatable. You can always update your form, and you can transfer your data to Microsoft-based programs. So keep it simple at the start when you start doing housing assessments, and make sure you do your research before you jump into a housing database system, because there's always ongoing fees, ongoing maintenance that you have to pay for these programs. you know, a little more paperwork and a little more work with using Excel sometimes goes a long ways, especially if you're software. And what has happened in the past, the First Nation will invest huge amount of dollars in a program, and they will lose that if that individual moves on, right? So having something that's simple and straightforward, because if your housing clerk or your housing manager is the only one who's been trained in that housing database and they move on, then you got to start all over again and train that individual again. Okay, so I hope that answered Walter's question. And I think, all right, so people are emailing me. I'm getting notice on my emails for that thing. I will send it out this afternoon for that. It's just an Excel inspection that we have made up here. Let me see here. Can you email the template or asking? Sorry, my screen cut out. Okay. But years of experience that could. Another question. So if you don't have post-secondary education, there's a question here someone asked. With the Ontario OBOA system, they generally ask 3 to 5 years of construction experience. And that doesn't necessarily mean being a carpenter or something like that. If you have construction experience and any other training you do have, you can send that to the OBOA and they'll do a review and assessment of your application. You can go to the OBOA website and you can print out their form. It's going to show reversed here, but I printed it out here, and it tells you in this certification program, they kind of outline what you need and what you can qualify to become a building inspector. Now, there's nothing stopping you here in Ontario to start taking that training and start taking those building code courses and just working with them. If you get a no now, they'll probably say you should have another year of experience or take some more courses, because with the Ontario system, again, I'll say, when you want to be an inspector, the municipality or the Ontario Ministry of Housing, once you can write their tests and pass, and technically you could work for a municipality unless they require you to be certified through the OBOA. So I hope that answers the question about being certified. Now, let me see here. I'm sorry, this screen is so small. You know, I'm a building inspector, technical guy, not a technical guy, reading all these questions here. So if there's any more questions, or if I haven't answered your question, maybe please type it again. I'm reading through them. Thanks, coming back. I'll be emailing. Oh, someone wants the template. Okay, I think that's good. Is there any more questions? Okay, so talking about insurance. Let's say now that you're a building inspector, you have certification through some agency, and whether it's through the ACBOA, that was the other thing I forgot to mention. I think I did. You could be certified through there's a national certification, Alliance of Canadian Building Officials Association, ACBOA. So right there, might be in reverse, but you can go and just type in National Certification Inspector. The website should pop up. That's another national one. If your province or territory doesn't have its own inspection, there's ways you can be certified. Now, for insurance, one thing I would encourage you is your tribal council or your First Nation, they get insurance. And then you as an individual, it's up to you, because you as an inspector can be sued if, say, somebody in the house you inspected, you missed a smoke alarm that was supposed to be in the bedroom, and you missed it and you made a report and the house caught on fire and an individual or the property got damaged, you can be sued and you can be named in the lawsuit. And you will be, because everyone nowadays, everyone is named in the lawsuit. So, and then you may have to pay. The judge will decide who pays how much going through the court system. You know, it's a scary system of being a building inspector, but that's just a part of the job, right? So yes, I would encourage all of you, if you are concerned or if you think you need it, you should get insurance, and you can just reach out to almost any insurance company to start out with your own, and you can just tell them that you're a professional building inspector and to see how much it costs for insurance. So it wasn't very expensive in regards to how much you can be sued, but I used to carry it for myself, and I can't exactly remember. It wasn't no more than $100 or $200 a year, but I mean per month. But that's something to look into. I would encourage you guys. Okay, the other thing that there's another question about here. How about on-site sewage in First Nations? The other thing within Ontario, Health Canada for on-site sewage systems, you know, the weeping tile. It's their job to come out and inspect what is being done. But I would encourage that when you're doing your house plans and your design, that you have in Ontario someone who is certified to be a designer, and then you can also have a certified installer for on-site sewage systems. And then Health Canada would come in and verify installation and verify that it is meets code. That's how on-site sewage system works in Ontario. But you as a building inspector, you can also take that training, and you can also have that under your belt, that you can be a certified inspector for on-site sewage systems, because those are the kind of things that are in First Nations where they don't have pipe sewer. There's on-site sewage inspections, and there's many different systems out there, and just being familiar with them all too is a good thing. And each website of manufacturer has installation instructions and manuals, but they all have to meet the CSA standard out of the Ontario Building Code. All right, guys. Well, just to wrap up, again, if you guys have questions, you can always reach out through the First Nation Community website. And then also don't forget to register, because we are going to have a conference this year, and it's going to be a virtual conference, I believe now. We were debating on having a real, but now we're having a virtual conference. Don't forget to sign up. And I want to thank everyone who listened to me. And again, I apologize for the internet. And then if you have any more questions, you saw my email there. And I believe this stuff's going to be available to watch later on. And then we'll go from there. And I think that's it. And I would just like to thank everyone for listening, and have a great day.